Hi, my name is Amanda, and this is my reading connection for Module 1. I felt like the main idea of Module 1 this week was, what is autism? Within the articles and the videos, I thought there were three major themes that were covered. First, that autism is a spectrum disorder. Second, that autism spectrum disorders are a neurological disorder. And third, that they went into to define the common characteristics found among individuals with autism spectrum disorders. To elaborate a little more, when speaking that autism is a spectrum disorder, it means that the severity of autism can differ. In other words, it's how the disability impairs their functioning in daily life activities. The level of intensity that the impairment or the disability has on their function is individually based. You can't say that student A with autism impairments in their daily life is the same as student B with autism. Even though that there is a difference in the severity of autism, that it's on a wide spectrum, that it could go from mild to severe, all individuals with autism have common characteristics. Despite whether their impairment is a mild or severe case, they all have deficits in communication, restricted repetitive behaviors, and social reciprocity. And also that these deficits may continue despite the age of the individual. Another theme that was discussed across the module was that autism spectrum disorder is a neurological disorder. This is important when linking behavior characteristics to the psychological models of ASD. It is based on brain behavior connections. Individuals with ASD are not engaging in behaviors by choice or based on reinforcement or punishment. They are engaging in the behaviors because of how their brain developed. They perceive the situations and the environments differently than their typical peers. When conducting an imaging-based study using children, adolescents, and adults, it was found that the physicality, neural connections, and neural systems of individuals with ASD were different than their controlled norm peers. Physicality meant the size and the shape of individuals' brains were different. When speaking about the neural connection, it was talking about how the individuals attached the meaning, took in the information, and processed that information. When speaking about neural systems, it discussed that the different areas of the brain work collaboratively in order to process the information. Again, it was found that individuals with autism spectrum disorder differed from their typical performing peers in all three of those areas. For example, in one study, individuals with ASD in a norm group were asked to identify different letters. Individuals with ASD use more of their visual processing area of their brain to identify the letters, whereas their norm group used more language to identify the area. This just showed how they process the information differently, and then how they might attach meaning. The norm group, when seeing the letters, immediately attached language to it, whereas students with individuals with ASD didn't attach the same meaning. They were using visual processing to identify it. They weren't connecting it to language. Another example, in a study, it was shared that the norm group and the ASD group were asked to complete different complex tasks. When completing the complex tasks, the individuals with ASD use significantly less areas of their brain in order to process the information. So the neural systems that they were accessing were far less than their norm group peers. Individuals with ASD act differently and engage in different behaviors because their brain functions and works differently. The next theme that I saw across the module was discussing the characteristics of an autism spectrum disorder. The DSM-4 criteria for autism is used to describe the common behavioral characteristics of individuals with autism spectrum disorders. It is used by professionals to identify individuals with autism. It is important to remember that it is the accumulation of behaviors that identify someone with autism. It is the collection of the symptoms. It's not just having one characteristic or even two characteristics. It's all of them interacting and working together. As stated before, the behaviors can be at different levels of intensity. But what I saw discussed across our module repetitively was that there was a deficit in communication, restrictive or repetitive behaviors, and social reciprocity. To elaborate, when saying delayed communication, it means it could be verbal or nonverbal. It's the idea of using the language, initiating conversations, and maintaining conversations. It's also comprehending. Just because someone has memorized a certain phrase or are able to repeat a phrase, especially when you think of echolalia, they repeat just common phrases they hear or ones that they enjoy, it doesn't necessarily mean they understand it. Also being able to have expression, to share your own ideas, to elaborate on them, not just with your needs and wants, but with your feelings as well. Imitation. This is particularly important when you think of young children, whether they're able to imitate or copy their parents or friends, and also play. When thinking about delayed communication, it affects how an individual with ASD may interact at home, school, and the community. When thinking about home, if they can't communicate to their parents, they're not able to share what they need or they want. As well as at school, if you can't communicate, you're not able to show how much you know or that you've learned. Within the community, you aren't able to, especially when you're thinking of children, the social interactions, being able to play and getting to know someone, to have those shared experiences, learning from other people, perspective taking. All those opportunities are lost without this communication piece. Next is thinking about restrictive, repetitive behaviors. With the restricted piece, it's that inflexibility to new situations or environments. The individual is not able to adapt to a change in the environment or to adapt to a new situation that's presented to them. They don't have the problem-solving capabilities to understand what's going on, and they're not willing to change or work with the new situation. With repetitive behaviors, think of motor movements. A lot of times, beyond just doing the repetitive behaviors, it can have deficits further on in their writing, their typing, their buttoning, their snapping, their balance, and even their muscle strength. Thinking about how hard they push on something or how soft they might touch something. When you're thinking about at home, just the buttoning and snapping, I think of small children getting ready, being able to pick out their clothes for the day and get dressed, as well as in the classroom. If you're not able to write and share your ideas, it's going to be very difficult to complete all sorts of assignments, ranging from written expression to reading to math. Writing really is used across the board, even in science and social studies. And if you're thinking about the muscle strength, it could even affect your keyboarding abilities. Also within the community, with the motor movements, thinking about your balance, just being able to go on a bus ride, being able to balance if you need to go up and down the steps, to think about walking down the street, bumping into other people, especially on a busy street or city, and then further thinking about the sensory perception. This can be affected as well. When you're thinking of sensory, I typically think of my five senses: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching. An individual with an autism spectrum disorder has difficulty organizing, identifying, and interpreting this kind of sensory information. This could make them over or under responsive, as well as cause problems distinguishing between all the different sensory inputs. This can again have huge effects. A lot of times when I think about sensory input, in my own experience, dealt with students having difficulty tasting and smelling new and different types of food. Because of their sensory input, the taste, they were very sensitive to it, or the smell, they were very sensitive, so it caused difficulty in giving them a nutritional meal. They would kind of get stuck or inflexible with certain foods that they were familiar with and have a difficult time trying new and healthy foods. Also thinking in the classroom, many times it seems like the classroom environment might be quiet or appropriate for the classroom, but then you have a student who's covering their ears, they might be crying because it just feels like or seems like it's too loud for them. Also, when it comes to touch, I've dealt with many students who they've been under responsive to the touch or over responsive. The over responsive, I think, is the kid who doesn't want the pat on the back. They don't want to give a high five. There's a small child that doesn't want to be held, or they might have a difficult time going out and buying shoes and new clothes because it just does not feel right to them. It's over responsive to their body. They have to pull out all the tags. And then with the under on the flip side, the under responsive are the friends who go up and they hit the other kid when they were just meaning to tap and the other kid says ow, or when they're writing they break all their pencils because they're pushing so hard and they might rip and tear through the papers because they don't realize they're pushing that hard. The next characteristic that was discussed was called social reciprocity. What this is, it's that interaction that's going on during a social situation. You're having eye contact, there's joint attention, and you're seeking and sharing that same enjoyment. It's a give and take. The difficulty is that individuals with ASD don't engage in these behaviors. They don't have eye contact. They don't seek and share enjoyment with the other person, and they have a difficult time having that joint attention, attending to the same thing. This results in them having a difficult time in developing true relationships. They're not sharing enjoyment in the same activity. They're not going to be learning from another person. They're not going to be able to learn the perspective take or adopt the same point of view as others because they're not interacting with the other person. Also, this has huge implications because children learn a lot through play, and if they're not acting and playing and imitating other individuals with play, they're not having as much opportunity to learn and grow from others. Also, they're not reading and responding to different people's expressions. They're not able to understand and think about how that's linked to different behaviors. They're missing out on all these opportunities. Things like joint attention develop very early in a child's life. Without having these, they miss out on incidental learning opportunities. That could happen with their parents and with teachers. If they're not able to attend to the same idea or concept being changed, they're not able to organize the information and later create their own representation of the information. From this module, I learned a lot. The biggest thing that I learned was that remembering students with ASD engage in behaviors because it's how their brain works. It's not a choice. These behaviors aren't occurring because they chose to have them. They're occurring because that's how their brain works. It's a neurological disorder. It's more about how they perceive the situation. The reason why the social interactions are less, or they may be refusing to do work, or not wanting to change a routine isn't because they don't want to interact with someone, or that they don't want to do the work, or try the new thing out. It's because they don't have the problem-solving capabilities to understand what's going on. Other insights was the DSM-4. I found it amazing how it was the first to provide the defining characteristics. It allowed for quicker and easier identification and reduced the misdiagnosis. This is important to me because it leads to early identification, which can lead to early intervention. This will in turn lead to better long-term outcomes. Individuals with disabilities have lower rates of graduation, post-secondary education, job, and independent living. If we can provide that early intervention, they have a better chance of achieving these goals. Implications to practice is that I should get to the point, explicit organization and explanation. I need to break down assignments into smaller, more manageable tasks so the students can be successful. Also, I would need to respond to what they do, not what they say. They might not actually comprehend what's going on or have the social maturity yet. And lastly, I need to provide several opportunities to practice across routines, environments, and individuals. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.